This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, live across the UK on your TV, on your radio, and online, and the old YouTube.
Yes, lots of people watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but it means you can join in the fully immersive experience.
Oh, yes. I don't know what that might bring you.
I don't know. I just think immersive is a great word.
It's a great word. Get the VR goggles on. Who knows where you might end up.
It'll happen one day, won't it? Yeah.
So I'll sit you between the two of us.
Yeah, oh no. It's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, political editor of the HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and former Conservative advisor, Claire Pearsall. Morning to you both.
Morning.
Thank you for coming in again. Let's talk about the Queen's Jubilee, Claire.
Yeah.
Because there's news now that she's announced who's going to join her on the balcony and who isn't.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good way of dealing with it, to say that working royals only should come on the balcony. I think this is the Queen being her most diplomatic and trying to please everybody, but also not getting any of the protocols wrong. I mean, she is so correct, and I think this is a good way of doing it. If you're not working, then you're not going to be up here, and nobody's going to feel like they've been singled out, because it's quite clear who is going to be there. So I think this is a really good idea. It's interesting that Harry and Meghan have finally decided that they're coming. How nice. And
I wonder when they will, if they read today's headlines, though. Because, like, you look at the front page of the Mirror, it just says the one word, snubbed.
Well, do you think that this is perhaps playing into their hands with their documentaries and all their film crews coming round? It adds to the drama of their occasion.
It does. Mind you, Angela Levin, who we were talking to last Sunday, I think she was on, was saying she didn't think the Queen was going to be on the balcony either.
Well,
it's very difficult. It's apparently quite difficult to get onto the balcony.
It is, and she isn't doing garden parties. So the invites have gone out for very different garden parties, but the Queen will not be in attendance. So, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe she won't come out.
And apparently they're going to use the Gold State coach in one of the parades, but she isn't going to be in it. But they are going to somehow sort of superimpose an image of her in it.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is almost like the sort of virtual reality monarch.
Well, she did say, didn't she? Was in that interview with Alistair Bruce, and she said it was very uncomfortable.
Yes.
Coach.
Yeah. Apparently it is very. But
and probably when you're 96-ish now, that's even more uncomfortable, I would have thought.
Yes. I don't mind
it's got great suspense.
Oh, you sub it?
Oh, no, I'd
wear a white glove and wave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I could
Big
see
hat, nobody know the
gold
difference.
coach.
Yeah.
Oh, it reminds me of that Carry On film. Do you remember it with Caesar?
Yeah.
He was playing Caesar, was it Kenneth Williams? And they just shoved the hand. They just shoved the hand out the curtain doing that, and it was on a stick.
Yeah. Maybe that's what they'll do. Apparently, yes, they're going to use the state coach, but they're going to somehow sort of laser in an image of her rather than her herself.
Oh, yeah,
but all sorts of things are going to happen, apparently, to save her legs, I think.
What about an Aussie escape, Kevin? This is in the Daily Star.
Yeah, so they've splashed on this, which makes a nice change from local elections, I suppose.
Yes,
quite a left field choice, but yeah, they've happened upon this research that's been done by a solicitor's firm on apparently the number of Brits searching about the possibility of going to Australia is up 670%. People researching visas for Australia now. What they're reading into it is that this is people are just fed up with, I guess, the weather here, the cost of living crisis, all the various drudgery of living in the UK at times, and thought, let's try and get away. Now, it'd be interesting to know how many of this 670% actually follow through, or if it's just one of those things, you've had a bad day, let's see what living in Australia might be like. I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's a big... I heard you talking earlier about... Wanted Down Under.
Oh, yeah.
You see a lot of them on that, and they go through all the various processes, and it looks great. And then come the end up, they just think they're way too far away from the family, so they end up not going. I mean, it's a nice dream to have.
Nice dream.
And a lot of people do it. And I've got a friend.
But the cost of living isn't very much cheaper there.
No, that's the thing. I think, yeah, it's pretty much of a muchness, unsurprisingly. The one thing it's got going for it, obviously, is the weather. Yeah. You're pretty much guaranteed.
There's a lot of blue sky in Australia.
Yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It must be a very big sky.
It is a huge sky.
It's an enormous country.
It appeals to me.
It does. I mean, it sounds beautiful, but as you say, with those kind of programs that you watch, where people have the message from their family, suddenly realise
And
that
then
they
floods of
can't
tears,
quite leave, and it isn't round the corner, and it is the other side of the world.
No, do you remember, 20, 30 years ago, we were talking about, Branson was talking about it, wasn't it? Going sort of subsonic or something and getting us to Australia in 3 hours.
Suborbital.
Suborbital, that's it, yeah. And it never
What happened to
happened.
that? Yeah, it's still...
And even
24 hours.
Concorde was never allowed to go there, was it? It could go as far as...
To America, didn't
So it
It went to America, but then it also went to somewhere on the way to Australia, but it could never get you all the way there because they wouldn't allow it to land. So there's never been any way of really speeding up the process of getting to Australia, which is such a shame because it's such a beautiful
It
place.
is, yeah. It was a bit easier to get to. I'd love to get down there.
Elon Musk should be thinking of that,
I'm
shouldn't
sure
he?
he is.
Well, NASA is
seems
planning
quite
something.
Yeah.
NASA should be doing all this, but instead they're focusing on asteroids, Claire, in the FT.
Yes. Now this is quite interesting. So this is, just sort of brings up all the Armageddon images of asteroids about to crash into the Earth.
Bruce Willis.
Yeah, being the hero, saving the day, sacrificing his life. But it's not quite as sold. So the FT, it looks a little bit dramatic until you understand that it is an asteroid that is circling the sun. So it's orbiting the sun, and another asteroid joins in and then orbits that. So what NASA have done, and what the scientists at Johns Hopkins University have done, is create a dart, as they call it, which they can shoot and will splinter the asteroid. So it's in case something should come near to the Earth's orbit.
So they're doing this to just sort of prove that they can do it.
Absolutely, and this is a dream in the sort of physics world, that this is happening and you have these two asteroids and it's far enough away not to impact the Earth when things shatter. But it just shows you what is possible in the field of physics, and I find it quite fascinating. I think space is fascinating.
And might be important. I don't know if you've seen the new David Attenborough documentary.
I was going to say that, yeah.
The day the dinosaurs died.
Yeah. There was no...
Absolutely incredible. I mean, it wasn't even that big an asteroid, was it?
Oh, that's what's scary about it.
But it killed off the dinosaurs, and there could one day be, and it would be nice to know that NASA could shoot at it. and
Exactly, and
break it
that's
up
why I
to a
think
million
it's such a good
splinters.
story.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite as dramatic as perhaps.
So it's already left Earth, hasn't it? It's already been shot.
Yes, I mean, it obviously takes some time to get towards its target, and they want to catch it at a certain point in the orbit so that any of the fragments,
Don't hit us either.
into our orbit and then come down into the atmosphere.
I think it's going to hit in September. That's
It
due
is,
to
yes. So we got to look out.
Not that I'm interested in these things. I absolutely love. Yeah, the trajectories meet
Isn't
in
it amazing
September.
though? So they fire something off and it's going to hit its tiny target, which is an asteroid orbiting an asteroid.
Yeah.
6 months away.
I love the way when the newspapers try to describe to you how big the asteroid is, they always put, like Big Ben or something next to it. Show you
Yes.
it's worth about 5 Big Bens or something, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Empire State Building, as they
There you go.
say in the
Yeah.
Financial Times.
It's about
absolutely
5 times as big. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it looks tiny next to it. But it's the same as we all use a measurement, something the size of Wales.
Wales is always the...
Yes, it's like the scientific equivalent.
Yes. Wales is about the size of Wales.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's, the international monetary term for something.
Well, I'm very relieved to know that NASA are working on it. That's all.
Yes. No, I quite like it. But, he'd spent nuclear weapons up there and, like old Brucey Willis.
Yeah, I mean, there's
The
something sort of quite fascinating about saving the planet. So.
Yeah.
Very clever stuff. How do we... If we've got time, how do we go from that to, Kevin, to Guardian's take on the local elections?
It's quite a sharp handbrake turn. It's the eye, actually.
Beg your pardon.
One of the many angles of the local elections was in Scotland, obviously. I find that particularly interesting. But yeah, I can't think why. And what's interesting up there is, again, the Conservatives have dropped down into third place. They were second behind the SNP for quite some time. Labour have made a bit of a comeback. But, after 15 years, the SNP, their representation went up again, the most councillors they've ever had. And, despite the fact that their record in government isn't great, their record in local government in places like Glasgow is awful, and yet they're still the biggest party. And it just shows, I think, what happens when the Constitution just dominates everything. So it doesn't matter if your local bin doesn't get collected. If you are a staunch nationalist, you're going to vote SNP. It trumps everything, which is why they're still riding high.
I heard somebody yesterday saying that Labour couldn't possibly win a general election in this country until they can do much, much better in Scotland.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Pretty much. I mean, they would need a landslide in England like in 1997 or a swing to Labour in England to not need Scotland, which is, the 97 election was a once in a century election. So pretty much, yeah. I mean, if you think back...
That just shows what an uphill struggle they've got.
Well, you think back in the 80s, 90s, they used to routinely send 40, 45, 50 MPs down, Scottish Labour MPs, and now have one.
Yeah.
So they have to make some kind of comeback up there, really, so that they're not relying on SNP votes to get a majority Lib Dems that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And that is a particularly toxic thing on the doorsteps in England. It's a very potent attack by the Tories. They say, well, if you vote Labour, you might end up having to do a deal with the SNP. Do you really want that? That was very effective.
Yes, it was, yes.
David Cameron, so you can see them maybe doing that again in 2024.
Oh dear. Well, if you are north of the border, let us know what you think about all of that. Because, it's fascinating, especially we're talking now a similar thing in Northern Ireland as well with Sinn Féin and what have you, and whether that's going to turn into a unionist vote or a nationalist vote, depending on where you are on that one. Thank you both. It's been really good to see you today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.